Great. Hi, everyone. So the GSMA has actually been working in the space of maximizing mobile data for various public interest purposes for several years now, since 2017. We started a mobile big data project now called AI for Impact. And we have a task force of 20 operators and an advisory panel from various UN agencies, including WHO and UNICEF, UN Global Pulse, some of these other organizations that look at how data can be maximized to meet the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That's been a focus of ours for a while. So not only are we trying to gather these thought leaders in the area, but we're also trying to build a common framework to facilitate these types of projects in a responsible way globally. A number of our operators at the GSMA, because we have nearly 800 now, but a number of them have analytical departments that focus on the use of aggregated and anonymized big data, including Telefonica, Vodafone, Telenor, DT, but we're also trying to build capacity for other mobile operators around the world. And again, this is in the space of aggregated anonymized data. So we're primarily looking at that aggregated mobility location data. So data about the proximity of a person to a tower when they make a call or when they send an SMS. And that is not as granular as GPS. So you can't, contact tracing is not something that people have been trying to do with the network data. Separately for GPS data, there's been effort in that area, but not for our mobile data. So this is looking at high level movements. And I can talk more specifically about COVID in a moment, but this is just a general thing that we're trying to do across the industry. Obviously, even though we say this is about aggregated and anonymized data, privacy is very important and accountability is very important. So the way we run these programs is the analytics are done by the operator, and then generally insights are developed by the operator. So that would be a heat map or a graph that's developed and tailored to the particular purpose of the government or NGO partner. So this is not about putting a data set together and just sending an aggregated anonymized data set over to the government. Our program is more specifically about those kind of tailored insights, and we've run programs where we've developed in advance dashboards, for example, in Japan that could be used for disaster preparedness. So some of these things are in advance. Other operators have done things that are more based on emergency need, like earthquake response. We've also done trials involving combining mobile data with sensor data to detect CO2 levels, to try to predict pollution levels in Brazil. So there's a number of different applications, and we always take care to enforce a code of conduct that we have, which talks about preventing re-identification, or rather prohibiting that, and a number of access controls. Because even if we're talking about anonymized aggregated, we still think, again, that accountability, access controls, a number of other factors are important. And it doesn't stop with the mobile network operator. These obligations extend to the partners as well. And for us as telcos, I mean, you mentioned earlier whether the EU framework is overly broad. I mean, we support the GDPR. We've been very supportive, and have been implementing that. But for mobile operators, even if an area has a horizontal data protection law, including in the EU, there's also separate e-privacy regulations in some cases. So in Europe, it's not just the GDPR, and I think there was some misunderstanding in the statistical community thinking that the GDPR alone would be fine for compliance in this area. But for mobile operators, it's the e-privacy directive, which is much more restrictive than the GDPR. So there's an educational component there. It should be streamlined, I think, in the future, but that's just where we are right now. In other countries, though, we have license obligations that are not necessarily publicly available, which can dictate how data is used or shared. It can prevent the sharing of data across borders. So if you have an analytical person that wants to work with a mobile operator on the ground, it literally has to be on the ground because they're not allowed to remotely access any of the data, even if they're contracted to the operator. So these are just some other issues that we think about in the privacy context. In the context of COVID, I mean, this is just a reflective map of some of the work that operators have been doing. There have been engagements all around the world. I think one of the more interesting things for this group could be the recent effort where 14 mobile operators worked with the Joint Research Center of the European Commission to develop 3 different studies using mobile data. And one of the high-level findings was that mobility alone can explain the initial spread of the virus in Italy, France, and Spain. And there were a number of other findings, and that effort continues to be ongoing. And again, this is focusing on the aggregated and anonymized data sets. So this is something that has been very valuable. In Norway, for example, Telenor was able to start looking at mobility before the first case actually hit Norway, so that they could predict how many emergency room beds that they would need eventually. So these things have proven helpful in specific contexts, usually at the national level, but the JRC effort was looking more at a regional level. In terms of privacy and COVID, we, as I said, had privacy requirements for our general AI for Impact program, but we wanted to do something that was more industry-wide, but also more applicable to everyone who's thinking of innovation in this space. And as Paul Olivier mentioned, there was a lot of discussion in this space. So we have these GSMA COVID-19 privacy guidelines where we talk about how any use of mobile data has to be trustworthy, it has to be lawful, it has to be transparent, and it has to be time-bound. So these can't be, even for anonymized aggregated data, this shouldn't be an unlimited supply of data that just goes on perpetually. Any requests for any identifiable data, there have been some cases in the media that we've heard about where identifiable data has been requested. Again, it's not great for contact tracing, so that hasn't happened as often. But that, for us, just falls into our normal government access policy. The GSMA always says that needs to be necessary, proportionate, lawful. So, ideally, minimization should apply. And if you don't need identifiable data, then we should work with the operator to get a more acceptable data set. So I think people who are interested in this area can take a look at the guidelines and also at our GSMA AI for Impact resources. We also have a new capacity building course, which is about mobile big data analytics. So processing the data for these types of projects on the technical side, and then also some of the policy and regulatory considerations, and also sustainability. And that course is for governments, because we've noticed one of the biggest obstacles is actually government capacity in some markets to know how they can use this data effectively. So we've been working with governments to help them with their understanding. And I think that is it for me. Thank you.